Today we're going to have a look at magnetic mates. My name's Craig Stevens and I'm an applications engineer and also a field engineer here with Central Innovation. So in 2017 this was introduced and it was part of the facility layout workflow that SolidWorks introduced. And the idea behind all of this was to simplify the procedure of putting large assemblies together. It was primarily focused on factory or workshop equipment layouts. One of the key limitations was that we could only magnetically attach to a single ground plane, but it was a good place to start. In 2018, some of the improvements that they included were allowing for the definition of multiple ground planes. They allowed us to cycle through the connection points for each component, and they also provided a lock that allowed us to lock those magnetic mates once they were in position. One of the difficulties in the 2017 version was that although you could magnetically mate, once you started dragging on them, it would pull them apart again. So that lock prevented that from reoccurring. And in 2019, the main improvement there was that we could assemble components using magnetic mates while editing in large design review. And this was 2019 was the first release which allowed any mates to be added in large design review. Aside from a small selection of the standard mates, magnetic mates was the only other non-standard mate type to be included with this functionality. Alright, so let's take a look at a basic procedure for setting up a part to be used in an assembly with magnetic mates. And what we need to do is publish an asset, and I'll take you through this in SolidWorks shortly. We need to define a ground plane. We need to define a connection point, a connection direction, and then we need to add a connector if we're going to add more, and define the connection point, define the connection direction, then add the connector, and then click OK. And for the assembly itself, we need to set the ground plane in the assembly. So what I'll do now is just bring up SolidWorks. Just wait for you all to see that. I'm just going to open up a file here. And I've just got a simple piece of straight train track. It's from a toy train, effectively. And so what we're going to do is go into the Tools menu. And there's an option here to use the Asset Publisher. I'm just going to click on that to launch that. I need to specify a ground plane for this component to attach to. So I'm just going to rotate this around. And I'm going to select the underside of this particular piece of track. And then you'll see in the dialog that it's asking for a connector. And what it's really looking for is a point. So I'm just going to click one of the vertexes on the track piece here to specify that. And then what it wants to do is specify a connection direction. And to do that, it's looking for a face. So I'm just going to select this face here, and you'll see that it shows an arrow. You can adjust the direction of that arrow, but I'm going to leave it pointing outwards at this stage. And as I said, once we've specified these details here for connector 1, I need to actually click Add Connector. And you'll see that it adds an arrow coming off that vertex there. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm just going to select that face. Actually, I'm going to select the vertex, sorry, for the connection point. And then I'm going to select the face here for the connector direction, and then click Add Connector to add that second connector into the connecting points box. Once I've done that, I can click OK. At the top of the Feature Manager design tree, you'll see the Published References feature, and within that you'll see the sub-features of the ground plane, Connector 1 and Connector 2. Okay, so once we've done that, I'm just going to go ahead and save that straight track file. And then I'm going to open up another file. I'm just going to go to my recent file list and open up some rounded track. And I'm going to go through that process again. So we'll go to Tools, Asset Publisher. And we're going to pick up on a vertex. So actually, let's set the ground plane first. I'm going to pick the underside of that component. Notice that you've got an option there. If you want to offset the ground plane distance, you have the ability to do that, but I'm not going to do that in this particular case. I'm just going to pick that vertex and the end face and add the connector, and do likewise on the other side. So again, a vertex and a face, add connector, and click OK. And that sets up our two components there. Just rebuild and save that. Whoop, save that one. And then we need to look at it from the assembly perspective. So I'm just going to open up an assembly that's been preset. So we've got a base plate set up in this assembly called Playground. It's actually a virtual part in this particular case. And what we need to do in the assembly is actually set up the ground plane that we want to attach those components to. So I'm just going to go to Insert and Reference Geometry. And in here you'll see that we've got the option to specify the ground plane. I'm just going to click on that one and click on the top face of that plane that we've already got in there and click OK. And you'll see below the mates folder in the assembly there's a new folder called ground planes, and we've got ground plane 1 set in that location. What I can do now is insert components. I'm just going to pick up on my straight track there, and you'll notice when I bring the straight track in that it's got two pinkish dots attached to it. If I just drag it off the red face there, you'll see them a little bit better. And so I'm just going to place it, and it'll automatically attach itself to the ground plane. There's no other components there at this stage, so it won't attach there. But if I have a look in the mates folder, you can see we've got a coincident mate between the ground plane and that component. I'm going to insert another component, so I'm going to pick up on my turn track now. And you'll see when I drop that in that it's automatically creating a reference between the magnetic mate locations that we predefined. So if I just bring that in and allow that to snap in there, it'll automatically attach itself to that first piece of track. And we could do that ad nauseum all day with inserting components. So if I put in another turn track here, or actually straight track, I can attach that there. And if I pick in another turn track, and I might just switch that around. Okay, and lock that into position there. What happens if we want to change the configuration? Well, that's no problems. It'll automatically update and maintain its location. If I drag this particular component, you'll see that it snaps away. But if I grab this one and drag it, it maintains that magnetic mate between the two last added pieces, so it maintains the magnetic mate at that location. Okay, so that's the basic procedure with parts in an assembly. Just go back to the slideshow. I'm going to go on to the some of the improvements that we've seen with magnetic mates. So as I mentioned, in 2018 we can support multiple ground planes, and there are two selection methods. So obviously if you've got more than one ground plane in the assembly there, you need some way of selecting which one you're actually attaching to. You can only have one active at a time, and I'll show you how that works shortly. The locking mechanism allows you to lock the position of the magnetic mates once they're in the model, and then also in 2018 they allow us to cycle through the moving components, which I've already kind of demonstrated a little bit in the previous example. So I'm going to switch over to SolidWorks again, and let's open up conveyor layout. So I'm just going to open this one up. Just rebuild this assembly. And you'll see in this particular example we've got two levels, and if I have a look at my ground planes in the model, this is set to use the ground floor by default. I can either double click on the mezzanine level there to activate that ground plane, or if I wanted to go back to the ground floor I can right click on it and choose to activate. But in this case we're just going to stick with the mezzanine layer there. I'm going to insert another component here, so I'm just going to choose another section of conveyor, and when I drop that into the model I can use the tab key to spin that around, and then I can use my square brackets to move through the selections of the magnetic mate nodes. Okay, so it picks the various nodes around the mate that I'm inserting. I can also choose which node I want to snap to on the other model as well. So if I hit the right hand key, that should, I think there's only one on that one, so that's why it's not moving. So I'm just going to snap that in there. And you'll see the lock icon, which I've been talking about, actually appear here on the screen if I want to lock that in position. So that's new. That was new in 2018. In 2017, you were able to lock, but it never actually gave you the icon there. So I'm just going to choose to lock that in position there. If I wanted to attach this conveyor, you can see I can bring that up and snap it on, again because we're working on the same level. If I wanted to bring in another conveyor on the other level, I would need to switch to a different ground plane. So I'm just going to activate the lower ground plane there, insert another conveyor, and you'll see that it wants to snap in alongside that existing conveyor there. Again, I've got the option to lock that into position. Okay. And then, so let's just close that off and let's come back to the slideshow. Having a look at some magnetic mate improvements in 2019. As I mentioned, mating in large design review. You can view the ground plane and publish reference folders in large design review. You can also create, edit and delete ground planes or ground plane features. What you cannot do though is edit the published references or define new connection points. So taking a look at SolidWorks again, and let's open up this model. And we're going to, from the open dialog, one thing that you need to observe is you need to switch to large design review mode. You also need to check on the edit assembly box, checkbox there, because if you don't check that before you open it, you won't be able to actually make those editing changes in the large design review mode. I'm just going to open that up. You'll see here in 2019 telling you all of the additional features that you can use. The ones at the top there were previously available in large design review. And what we've got here is just a section out of a large telescope array. And you'll also notice that on the large design review tab that we've got the option there to insert components. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that one. And I'm going to select a condenser to add into the model there. You'll see that when I bring that in, there's a number of nodes that I can attach to. Those pink nodes there are the magnetic mate nodes. I'm just going to snap that around there and bring in my condenser and add that in, and you'll see that it snaps in and attaches in large design review. And of course, if we save that now in large design review, if we open it up in any other mode, it will also maintain those mates. Those magnetic mates. We'll talk a little bit about the magnetic mate settings. In the system options, there are two magnetic mate specific settings. We've got magnetic mate proximity, which determines the distance at which the software initiates the magnetic mate. And then we've got the magnetic mate pre-alignment, which orients the component to align with the predefined magnetic mate. When it's enabled, the speed of the orientation is based on the smart mate sensitivity, which is this slider here. Obviously, if that's set to off, it won't observe that magnetic mate pre-alignment. There's just a couple of caveats with the large design review, with the magnetic mates. You can choose to use SpeedPack as well when you create the magnetic mate in SolidWorks. It's an option at the bottom of the Publish Assets dialog. That allows you to create SpeedPack configurations in the assembly, and it'll allow you to propagate that through. One of the limitations, though, with that SpeedPack, obviously, is that when you get to assemblies, you can't export that in with high-quality drawings, and as such, you can't create PDFs or DXFs when they're in the SpeedPack format. The only other thing I've come across is that orientations don't tend to update, and you need to reinsert the component when you're working in large design review. So a couple of things to watch out for there. Conclusions, it is a really handy tool to put things together in a simple way. I suggest that you take a look. Obviously, if you've got any issues, you can feel free to contact me. So if there are any questions, just email me. Well, thanks once again for listening.